So welcome everybody to another webinar. I've been struggling with what to call these, Jamin. What is it? Interview, webinar? What are we
You
doing
know,
here?
mastermind powwow. I like that's a powwow. What about a powwow?
Ooh, powwow. Powwow is very underused and underrated.
Probably not
So,
the most corporate word, but
yeah. Well, we're super excited today because today we have Ronald. What do you prefer,
I go
Ronald?
by Ron. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So today we have Ron. And do you pronounce your last name Road?
Rohde.
Rohde.
Odie.
Interesting, because my last name is spelled Junge. Nobody ever does the E at the end. I get Junji, sometimes Junji, but it's Jungi. So interesting. But we have Ron Rohde today, and we're super excited. We're going to dive into some Q&A with him about his background in commercial real estate and what he's doing nowadays. He is an acclaimed speaker, podcaster, probably got a robust YouTube channel. So we're super excited that you joined with us today. And you are coming all the way from Texas?
Yeah, I'm in Dallas. So
Beautiful. Well, so let's start it off by just telling us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the field of commercial real estate.
yeah, well, thanks for that introduction. I'm really excited. I work with eXp locally here too. So some of the I don't know founding partners for that eXp commercial are great brokers to work with. But yeah, about myself, I grew up in North Texas. Parents have always been involved in real estate, probably more so on the residential and notes and a little bit of land and office building stuff. But all of my legal career has been in real estate and specifically real estate transactions, helping investors buy investment properties, leasing, triple net leasing, PSAs, title, survey, all of those documents that you need to buy and be successful at investing in commercial real estate. My own investments, I started my firm 6 years ago. Kind of coincides when I sold my residential portfolio and sold about 6 units, six houses. And I dumped everything into industrial. That turned out to be a great choice. I mean, I did a survey. I was looking at multifamily. I probably would have made more money in multifamily, but super happy with industrial. Can't complain. And it's all triple net leased. We have, several single tenant buildings, some IOS, industrial outdoor storage, and that's all in DFW across, again, I guess probably six or seven additional sites that are, anywhere from 10 to 50,000 square feet. And in my daily practice, I have a small shop here. We've got attorneys and staff beyond just me, but we help investors, answer these questions, and especially for you guys as agents and fiduciaries for your clients, we help bridge that gap when there's a question about a contract, when there's a question about a lease, who pays for what, who pays for the HVAC, who pays for plumbing. We dig into the lease and tell you the answer. Same for loan documents or easements or restrictive covenants, all sorts of legal questions that, you guys can say, this is a great deal, but what do the details look like? What does the paper actually say? So that's my background. Yes, I do have a YouTube channel. Happy to drop a link, but I love, making content specifically for industrial real estate. And yeah, just, I'm here as a resource. If you guys have any questions, just drop me a line. I'm happy to help if I can.
I absolutely love that. And there is so much to unpack in that introduction. Thank you so much. Like, I already have a million questions for you. I want to start general. I mean, what was it like growing up in a real estate family? Because
It was.
I raised my kids in real estate and they wouldn't touch real estate with a 10-foot pole. My son is a police officer now.
Yeah. I think it was different for me. I was definitely comfortable, I guess. My parents were successful, so they bought me a car when I was 16. I was very excited. I got, like, this Honda Civic, and I thought I was really the coolest kid. But that very first weekend on a Saturday, they handed me a stack of papers, and they said, okay, you got to go drop this off at the tenant's house. Okay, go wait for this plumber at this vacant unit. Go drop these keys off somewhere else. I'm like, whoa, this is what I signed up for. And they say, yeah, well, if you have a car, you're basically our errand boy before Uber. before cell phones even. And I really credit that to kind of sparking that interest of knowledge, because when you go to a vacant house and the plumber is working on something, I don't have a cell phone to go on Instagram or TikTok. So I'm just standing there, and you got to chat with the guy. If anybody's sat with plumbers, they're very talkative people. And he's just talking, oh yeah, your parents are great, they're super nice, they always pay me fast, they don't quibble and blah blah blah. I work with some investors, they do this, and then I shortchange them that, and it's really, and so we're just chatting, and for me, I got to learn a whole lot about the vendor ecosystem, the support professionals, that title company, different agents, buyers and sellers, because again, this is pre-internet days, so we're running a lot of paper, wet ink stuff, and I don't know, people didn't have fax machines. We had a fax machine, but yeah, so that's what it was like. I think I was always exposed to it, but I enjoyed it, so I kind of leaned into it when I was in high school. So
I love that. I actually have a pretty similar background. Not that my parents were in real estate, but I ended up getting in the game at 17 years old when I graduated at a title company, which I thought was super fortunate to be able to reverse engineer understanding how real estate works and how it transacts from a very title level, right? Rudimentary. But I ended up getting a job with this guy when I was 18 years old. He says, "Why don't you come work for me? I'll pay you $1 more an hour." He was a hard money lender. I was like, "You mean I'm going to go from $4 an hour to $5 an hour? I'm in." But it was a very similar bringing in real estate. He was an incredible mentor. But I had a walkie-talkie, and it was, go open this door and let the repairman in, or, go deliver this, or go sit here and wait for this to happen, which we love, especially, when we're training new agents. We like to give them that boots on the ground introduction to real estate, because really, how else do you learn how a piece of commercial real estate functions, especially industrial? You have so many different asset classes in industrial. You've got your manufacturing, I love that you mentioned iOS. iOS is
yeah,
all the buzz right now, right?
it's
Industrial
all the
outdoor
buzz
storage.
for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the buzz right now, especially post-COVID, which a lot of things have changed through COVID. But I love that you had that. It's a very robust learning skill set uh, from a very young age. So that's awesome. Oh, if your mic is on, please go ahead and mute yourself. So um, that's what was the transition for you to say, okay, now I'm going to go become an attorney?
Yeah, I think again, growing up with first generation, I always get confused. I'm second generation born here, but my mom, was born in Taiwan, and Chinese was her first language. So a lot of English terms or legal terms of art were hard for her and her network, and as well as our extended family. So when I was reading a lot of contracts. Let's just say it was, unauthorized practice of law as a 14-year-old, just reading a lot of these things, because they would ask me, "Hey, we got this letter. What does it mean? We got this HOA notice. What should we do? Are they fining us, or are they just giving you a warning? Is this a threat, or just a friendly hello?" And so I've always been reading stuff for other people, and that just kind of naturally translated into being a lawyer, where now I read 50-page leases and tell people what they mean.
And a lot of agents, when you get into the higher level transactions, the truth of the matter is that we're a conductor. Our job is to go out and find the real estate, analyze the real estate, analyze the value of the real estate, the markets, the submarkets, and deliver that information to the client. But when we get to the contractual phase, sometimes we're not even in the deal. A lot of clients have their own attorneys on staff, or we have to reach out to people like you for that type of guidance, because it's not like residential real estate, where if you have a membership to a local board, you're supplied with contracts and procedures that are the same every single time, right? Like they're all on the same playing field, which I love about residential real estate. It is just not the case in commercial real estate. Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no such thing as a standard commercial form. I think I get a lot of clients that say, can you just give me a standard PSA, something neutral down the middle of the fairway? And I say that doesn't exist. I mean, there are some promulgated forms, but they are very broadly, generically commercial, and they may be used for a multifamily building. They may be used for an office building, a multi-tenant grocery anchored retail complex, and then you're trying to do an industrial deal that has a lot of nuance about environmental concerns and some remediation and seller obligations post closing. We end up drafting a lot of addendums to reflect that, and we end up cutting and pasting that original contract so much that it would have been better to just start with a custom form right from the beginning, because it's very hard to read when you start slicing and dicing those standard contracts. But yeah, there's no such thing as a standard lease and no such thing as a standard PSA for commercial.
So, do you find that even between the different types of industrial real estate, you would use a different type of form?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you kind of touched on the different asset classes. Manufacturing is probably the biggest one. If there are fixtures, specialty equipment, so like a crane, some dock leveling, there can be different chillers or cooling systems, heat pumps. Those are big ticket items that you as a buyer care about the quality of them, and there may be additional representations about the seller providing maintenance invoices or service receipts, and you need that either A, to enforce the warranty on a system, or B, just so you know what work has been performed if after closing you've got to fix this thing. And again, in manufacturing and some of these things, those pieces of equipment can be very significant. I mean, we're talking like seven figures cost if you were to replace this thing new. And so manufacturing, I would say, probably has the highest one, where again, you may have dock levelers, you may have different loading equipment, cranes, different heat pumps, like I said, depending on the manufacturing use, conveyor systems, versus if you have kind of a normal flex multi-tenant building that's class B industrial, they're really just kind of metal boxes. They're kind of shells. They may not have insulation. They may have offices that have their own AC, but it's almost like a residential, it's a small, 5-ton unit or something. You're not cooling the whole warehouse. The dock doors may be pretty mechanical, so they're on like a chain pull. So again, you don't have all of these equipment pieces that require a lot of nuance about the condition of them. So yes, we will put less emphasis on some of those things within the industrial space. Again, we would probably put more attention on iOS to like the zoning, any CUPs, conditional use permit or supplemental use permit, SUP, that may be required for the buyer to close. And it just depends on the property and the goals of the investor and the buyer, what they need from the seller, or what they need to be accomplished prior to closing. I don't know if it's a seller obligation or a buyer obligation, but at the end of the day, the buyer's not going to close without X. So yeah, within industrial is a huge range, and then you've got Class A, tilt wall stuff, and you've got Class B, light industrial, and then you've got everything in between: specialty manufacturing, refrigerated storage, flex. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about your market, but our industrial we have so much new product on the market right now, and it's come so far as like technology and delivery, like just clear height. Everything is so different now, right? But we still have that old down and dirty, storage or warehouse that was built 40 years ago that is still very functional, right?
Yeah.
But they just operate really different. And I love everything you said, and I love to like bring it to real level like life situations that we've encountered to kind of like make sense. And when you're talking about this, I'm thinking about all the phone calls that I get from tenants,
Yeah.
who unfortunately maybe weren't represented or weren't represented well when they entered into these leases, and they don't really find out about the functionality of their lease until something goes wrong, right? So when something goes awry, then they're all of a sudden studying the lease and they find out, oh, that was my responsibility, or I didn't understand that when I signed this lease, that wasn't disclosed to me. Because these documents can be incredibly comprehensive. It was just last week we got a phone call from an auto shop, and their air conditioner went down, which they knew that the repair of the air conditioner was going to be their responsibility, but they didn't have it inspected or checked to see the quality of it prior to actually signing the lease. So it went down pretty quick. And then they went back after they paid to have it fixed, and they had to go through the property management's vendors, which was another particular of the lease. You can't hire outside vendors, has to be our approved property management list. After it was repaired, they went back to work the next day. And keep in mind, this is the middle of summer in Las Vegas. The air conditioner wasn't working. It was, they, had paid to have it repaired, but it just wasn't cooling. Well, what they found was that the guys didn't actually reset it back on the roof because the air conditioner had caused a lot of roof damage.
Oh.
So they didn't reset it, and then they found out that they were also responsible for the roof repair. So
Yeah,
this
that's
turned into a situation that was about to put them out of business.
and it's tough, I think that's pretty natural that their first call is to their agent. That may be the only real estate professional that they know or that they trust. And so I think for everybody on this call, you've got to have the Rolodex to know what is something that I can handle. Like, for that situation, you can say, hey, reach out to the property manager. You can make that call, whatever. It's kind of an unpaid charity thing, but I know a lot of agents do that for their clients. But then at some point, when do you say, hey, you need to get an attorney? This is turning into a battle, or I don't want, $100,000 of expenses to be paid without understanding. And same for CAM reconciliations. I get a lot of upset phone calls about CAM, and they're saying, we've been paying triple nets for the whole year. What do you mean I owe you another $18,000? This is ridiculous. And they say, well, that was just an estimate. Our actual expenses ended up being this. And then they say, well, that's too high. I want to audit. I want to look at it and say, well, look at your lease. Let's see what your audit writes. And that's something, again, you may get a call about CAM, but I don't say anything about CAM until I've looked at the lease, because it's really critical to understand what your obligation is. And you can't even give kind of what I just said. I can't give that general advice because maybe you have a cap on CAM, and absolutely you shouldn't have gone up that much. Maybe you have a base year that's not set or something, and that can cause some issues, ambiguity. But I think a lot of agents too, once you've gotten your commission, you don't want to reread the lease. At least that's
Well, and just
my
to put that into perspective for some people on the call that might be newer to commercial real estate and industrial, CAMS it's an acronym. We love alphabet soup in real estate. We've got like acronyms for everything. CAMS stand for common area maintenance. So compared to residential real estate, that might be what you call your HOA or your CIC, your common interest community. And CAMs are simply pass-through expenses on the property. They can't be upcharged, can't be undersold. So at the end of every year, like Ron was stating, the property manager, it's their job to reconcile the charges. And most leases will allow for them to come back to the tenant and retrieve any funds that they may have underestimated for, So your common area expenses pass straight through. And believe me, they're probably not going to be calling you to give you a check back if they overestimated. I'm not sure. But they will call you. They will call the client to retrieve any funds if they did underestimate. And it's more common than you would think. So it's another aspect of the lease that you really need to go over with your tenant prior to getting them into any type of transaction like that. But I appreciate that. And we have all levels of expertise on this call right now. So that's a good point, something good for people to look for. How do you stay updated on like the latest trends in real estate? I mean, laws are changing all the time. how we utilize real estate, especially industrial real estate, warehousing, logistics. It's changing like at record pace nowadays. So how do you stay up to date on all of the new trends and the new laws?
Yeah, I think that answer is, you start to have to develop a specialty. It's impossible to be an expert in everything, and especially if you have a dynamic, growing market, like Texas, you can't be expert in everything. So, luckily for me, on the legal side, legal updates apply across the board to all types of commercial. Legal typically just distinguishes residential and commercial. So if I'm on commercial, all of the laws will apply to multifamily or office or retail, COVID, eviction stuff. That's all commercial. But then on the industry side, I have a passion for industrial. It's what I invest in. It's what I own. And so that's my only asset class. And I don't, and it's very intentional that I don't own or research the industry stuff in any other asset class. So I don't own office. I don't own any multifamily. I don't have an interest. I just don't have time to be that drilled down. But industrial, definitely under that Class A new construction tier, which is the 50 million, $200 million buildings. Everything underneath that, I think, is fair game for my knowledge. But you just have to pick a lane. I think people will refer other buyers to you, and you can co-broke or something like that. You can split, but you want to be an expert in what you're doing, because the worst thing is to be a little bit good in an office building, and you've got this buyer that wants to buy an office building, and you're like, well, I don't know if this is reasonable. I don't know if this is a good price. I don't know if this lease term is fair. I don't know who the best lenders are. I don't know who the vendors to do an elevator inspection, because I'm used to selling three-story
Hi, good
walk-ups.
morning. Good.
Hey guys, if your mic is
Can we-
open, can you
oh,
please mute
go
yourself?
ahead. Hey, go. No, go ahead. Oh,
We're good.
okay.
We'll be there forever.
Okay.
I'm not sure who we got with open mic, but if you could please mute yourself, thank you. I had 400 questions based on what you just said, Ron, and I'm going to remember them right now. Stay in your lane. It's the difference between, if anybody out there has read the book Good to Great, it literally is the difference between good to great, right? So you stay in your lane and you pick a niche. Sometimes when we start in the industry, we don't know exactly what that niche is going to be. And depending on how big your market or your sub-market is, maybe industrial real estate as a whole is your niche. Maybe if you're in a larger market like Las Vegas or Dallas, you even narrow that down from, logistics or manufacturing or cold storage or iOS. Depending on how big your market is, because if you've got 5 million square feet of a certain type of industrial real estate, it's really hard to understand just exactly what's on the market and just that niche and how it operates and its value and how it's trending versus all of industrial real estate. So I love that you said that, because I preach that all the time. As newer agents, sometimes we don't know exactly what that niche is, and you just got to dig in and get as transactional as you can, in my opinion. And then once you start getting transactional, your niche will find you, or you just narrow down, because I agree with you 110%, and it can't be said enough. And for the sake of being repetitive, you can't master all. You will be a master of nothing if you try. And I think it's also worth mentioning too, is that I think a lot of agents are afraid to narrow down, because they feel if they get too specific, they might be missing out on something. They might be missing out on some type of business. And in my opinion and in my experience, and I've been doing this for over 36 years, the more niched somebody is, the more business they attract of exactly that niche. Because who else would I call? He or she is the expert in that type of real estate. So I think that, as whether you're, advertising on your YouTube channel, whether you're marketing your property, whatever you're doing, the more specific you are in who you are and what you do, and the more you research and stay educated in that field, actually the more business you get, not the less.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a interconnected world these days, and it should be a network of experts reaching out to other experts. That's really, I think you'll find more happiness, more stability and confidence, and ultimately you'll make more money. You know, yeah,
Your tribe finds you, right?
yeah, yeah.
So how do you navigate the complexities of, we've talked about the difference in contracts. We've talked about, like, have you ever seen two real estate transactions or contracts ever the same? And how do you navigate the complexities and the nuances of each of them?
Yeah, absolutely. Never the same. What we do for complicated transactions is really to try to narrow everything into segments. I don't know if that makes sense, but there are pieces of a transaction that occur, sequentially, chronologically, or have to do with other components, and that's the only way that I can manage complicated, multi-property, parties. We have three-party deals, tri-party, and you just got to break it down into its each element of the transaction, and you know always maintain kind of that high level. What's the 30,000 foot view? What's 10,000 foot view? And then what's in the weeds, really granular. But it just takes more time. I don't think it is more complicated. Each component is the same. Each component is something that we've done before. It's just the new combination of all of them. We've got this guy over here and this guy bringing in money, and they're going to buy this and pay that person. Have to contingent this, release that, but it all happens kind of sequentially. And as long as each one is handled separately, or conceptually, mentally, it's separate, then you'll be okay.
I've got Pam, I've got a question for Ron as well. So, we got the legal guy here, and I think that this is a very good opportunity for us to sharpen our iron, right? And, obviously we always want to have best case scenario, and most of the time deals go as planned and nobody gets in trouble and nobody gets sued and there's not money lost. But since we're on here, I would love, I'm sure you've got plenty of examples of this, but I would love for you to share just off the top of your head a few, one or two different stories, examples, scenarios that you've come across in your career where deals have gone south, and some lessons that you've gleaned from that you could share. Again, ideally we learn lessons from other people. We don't have to learn all of our lessons the hard way, and that's really the goal here, is to grow and avoid some common mistakes. What are some examples of scenarios where things have gone south, and how we as brokers, or advising buyers or sellers, can avoid potential pitfalls with industrial deals?
Yeah, so this is one that has come up, and it's a pretty regular thing. Basically, it's that legal clause, time is of the essence, and I get it a lot kind of from California buyers who are used to this notice and demand for a cure. There's like a notice to perform, and you've got 3 days to do whatever the other party says, and it's kind of wipes away all your sins. However, in most of the other states, time is of the essence, which means the date and the deadline is the deadline. So one thing that you can really learn from is not to assume what time say like a notice of termination. You're under contract for a commercial property. You've been in due diligence for 60 days, and now the feasibility is up on August 22nd, and you say, okay, we got to decide, are we gonna go hard or terminate the contract? And a lot of people wait until the very last day. They want to push. Pop quiz for everybody on the call. What is the time of day that notice is required to be sent, to be received, to be acknowledged? And how do you do it? It's a super important question when you've got 100,000 or 200,000 of earnest money, and yet my clients like to wait until the very last possible minute, so we're scrambling. And I'll go ahead and answer my own question, but the couple of answers can be 5 p.m. of the local time where the property is located, and that will be in the contract. It'll be word for word, like I said, and that is very clear. It's been litigated forever, and everybody knows what it means if the contract says that. And then yet I have clients that are buying a piece of property in North Carolina and they're based in Texas, and it's 1 hour ahead. It's in Eastern time. And so the 5 p.m. as of the date, the location where the property is located on August 22nd is actually 4 p.m. Central. So I'm telling my client, you've got to let me know by 4 p.m. and really by 3 so I can send this. And it causes a lot of heartburn, call it at like noon the day of, because they're thinking they've got until 5 p.m. and I'm like, no, you need to get this answer from your engineer, or you need to get this bid back so you can decide what you want to do in advance. And it's that's one option. I see that very common. It's normal. And then you have 5 p.m. Where the parties are located, or it will say Pacific time, and that is also a little bit confusing, because if you're a seller, you may think that you're based in Texas, and you say, okay, well, my money's hard. I've passed due diligence. I've made it. Phew. But then it's 5 p.m. Pacific, and then they send a termination notice at 6:30 at night, and then my client's surprised and disappointed. But I tell him that's the contract, and you have to read the contract to see what that deadline is, because then there's a third option, there's a final option, which is midnight, and 11:59 p.m. Somewhere, usually where the property is located, but it could be midnight as well. So you don't have to worry about 5 p.m., 6 p.m. workday. As long as you get that notice out by the end of the day, midnight somewhere, you're okay. I haven't had it, where I'm sending stuff at not 10 p.m. or 9 p.m. But if I send it at 6, even Eastern is going to be fine before midnight. But it's really critical to understand what are your deadlines, because a lot of contracts will come right pretty close to that deadline. And then how do you deliver notice? You've got to look at your contract. Do you have to deliver it in writing? Can you email notice? Does it have to be acknowledged? Does it have to be received? Should you do return, read messages on Outlook? Should you do that? Do you have to do that? All sorts of these little things. And then, who do you serve? Do you serve their lawyer? Do you have to serve title company? Do you serve the broker? So many questions of what is sufficient, because maybe we send it only to the seller and we don't copy the broker. Is that valid? What if we send it to the lawyer but not the seller? Is that valid? And you've got all these things, because I'll tell you that there's case law. You cannot serve the title company and say, here's my notice of termination, for example, without sending it all to the seller parties. Ultimately, your obligation as a buyer to terminate is to send that notice to the seller. That's it, period, full stop. There may be some additional requirements, but at the end of the day, the basic premise is you as a buyer have a contract with the seller. You're supposed to deliver notice to the seller. But if you just sent it to the title company, who cares? They're a neutral party. They don't represent the seller. And so I see some issues with that. It can get litigated, and there's some debate. If you copied the seller or something, then that probably counts, even if the letter is addressed to the title company. But if you copy the seller, they got notice. They are aware, even though it's not great. I would say it's not ideal, and your money is really at risk if you do that. But other contracts too don't allow email notice, in which case you've got to get something in the mail. You've got to have that tracking number that says it was picked up, and then it's valid, or it has to. Usually, it doesn't have to be delivered. I'd say a mailbox rule. If you dropped it in the mailbox and you have proof of that with the FedEx scan or something, that's usually enough. But you can just see I've talked for 15 minutes, 20 minutes about what is seemingly a very, very small detail in the contract, but I can't tell you how many times my clients get put into a situation that's uncomfortable or stressful for them because they didn't quite understand the rules or didn't comply with it or whatever. They assumed something was different and they didn't ask me kind of explicitly what is X, what is Y. And so you guys, you have a job too. And I see some agents kind of casually tell them an answer. They say, when's my earnest money? What's my termination up? When do I have to send notice of feasibility? And they say, August 23rd. Like, that's really not enough of an answer. Maybe it is if you're a month out, but that's not enough of an answer if you're a week away. You really got to be careful, and agents will be very casual about it, because in maybe the residential world or smaller transactions, it's a little bit easier. Maybe it's 5 p.m. And there's a whole paragraph about notice of termination. But yeah,
Well,
that's
it's casual until it's not casual. And the reason that most brokers and agents are casual about it is because they haven't probably been dinged yet.
yeah.
And at that point, it's not casual.
And when it's residential and the earnest money checks are lower, there is a little bit less stress. I mean, just in general, if you're talking like $1,000 whatever option fee, I don't really care. I mean, yes, I want to get it right, but the stakes are a lot lower. And now you get to a 20, 30,000 on a house, or 50K, okay, it's more important, but at the end of the day, it's not that much. When it's 100K or 200,000, yeah, everybody's paying attention, because nobody wants to tell their broker, hey, we screwed up and I told the client something and they never checked with their lawyer, and now they're hopping mad and that sort of thing. So
Ron, I would be interested to hear your feedback on this. One of our policies on my team and anybody I train is that you let the title company interpret that transaction and give you a timeline, right? I don't know if that's common in Texas or in other states.
yeah,
Nevada,
so we'll get it's called like a critical dates timeline.
Yeah.
What we do is we always generate our own critical dates, because we don't rely on third parties. So yes, they absolutely will. Well, they generally will create one for their own benefit. They always put disclaimers. It's not legally interpreted to be accurate, but yes, that's useful, but don't rely on it, because you've got to count your own days yourself and understand, because they make mistakes and they're off by a day or two all the time.
Well, I think the thing worth mentioning is that, their job is as disinterested third party as they're the money pushers, they're the paper pushers. It's their job to effectuate the contract as best they can, but you're right. And one of the other nuances in a lot of the contracts that we're interpreting, excuse me, when you are calculating days, they're not always business days and they're not always calendar days. Each contingency period can be calculated differently. So it's like knowing and understanding that. Then you layer over possibly any state laws. I know in the state of Nevada, there's a funky thing on the books where delivery is considered information is only considered delivered when that information is acknowledged on the other end. So just because I sent an email or just because I delivered some information that would be critical to stay within timeframes, if I sent the button 1 minute before on an email was acceptable, it's actually not considered received in the state of Nevada until it is acknowledged on the other end. So things can get very dicey.
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there's definitely litigation about that where, the other side will never acknowledge your email. And then, you're saying, okay, fine, we got to subpoena the Yahoo email servers to see if you actually did receive it, because it does happen. Not blaming them, but they could say, I really didn't get it. And we say, okay, fine, we believe you, but let's go subpoena Yahoo and see if they did receive it, because we didn't get a bounce back, or we got a positive, email received in Outlook. There's a lot of ticky-tacky little things, and if it's 200,000 on the line, just don't wait until the last minute. That's my advice.
So I think at the end of the day, we're not trying to scare anybody out of commercial real estate, but just understanding that it is technical. A lot of times there is a lot of money at stake. And based on your communication and transparency as the broker or the agent on record on that transaction, there is a lot of responsibility on your shoulders for creating contracts and delivering contracts. With eXp Commercial, we are, I would say, advised to use WinAir commercial forms, which I do feel, even when I owned my own boutique brokerage, I subscribed to WinAir forms, and I do feel that they are robust enough and compliant enough for each different sector of real estate and asset class to cover most transactions. And then, of course, as a real estate agent, if there's anything that's not in that contract, you don't want to operate outside your wheelhouse and start inserting language in that contract to where you'd be practicing law. Correct?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's to me there's two different categories there that I see a lot of issues. There is the contract side where you're kind of interpreting what's already been signed and what's been executed. What does this mean? And then the other area that I see a lot is where brokers start to type in addendums, where they start to add little clauses that says, okay, this sale shall not include the fountain in the front, courtyard. That's probably fine. I give brokers like about 5 words. If you can convey what you're trying to say in 5 words, you're good. But if you write more than that, that's where brokers or agents get in trouble because they have to say, okay, the fountain will not convey with the sale unless it goes to auction and then it sells, for more than 5,000, in which case it will revert with the sale and seller will leave it on the product. Like, what the heck does that even mean? It's too complicated. And when you're doing that, you're creating ambiguity, and I will almost guarantee it's going to be a dispute. It's going to be a fight that it's going to come back to me, and they're going to be like, Ron, what does this mean? The seller put it on Facebook Marketplace, but it didn't sell. But he didn't do it at an auction. He just did this. So does that mean I get to keep it, or he has to take it off? And sometimes, again, it can be like a big money issue. I'm assuming like a big, heavy, concrete thing. Seller is supposed to remove it, and they says no, I put it to auction and it didn't sell, so I'm going to leave it there. And then they say, no, you didn't do auction, you did this. And it's like, well, does Facebook count as auction? Well, what if we do eBay? What if you did a private auction? All these issues that we think about and we come across to try to make the obligations simpler, more black and white, and to avoid this dispute, because the parties won't be happy. And if we're zeroing in on a clause that the agent or the broker wrote, I'll tell you, everybody will be very angry. If we're debating a clause that the agent wrote, and it's really stressful for you because you're put under the gun of like, crap, did I just do unauthorized practice of law? Is somebody going to sue me if this blows up the deal, or if it costs $20,000 to remove this decoration? Do I have to pay for it out of my own pocket, out of my commission? So that's kind of the rule, and it's really no skin off your nose to say, well, I can't draft that. You need a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, thank you. So much to know contractually, right? And words are so important because they can be interpreted so differently. So yeah, it can be super clear in your mind what you mean to convey, but that's not always the way it's interpreted when it's written. So I love that advice. I want to take it back just personal for a second. We only have a couple more minutes, and then we'll see if anybody has any Q&A. If you do, go ahead and please type them in the chat, and we'll get moving there. But you chose industrial warehouse as your preferred investment vehicle. Why?
Yeah, so again, I did kind of a broad survey. It was really a reflection of my own personal life at the time. I'm married. We've got 2 small kids. I was kind of doing my law firm, started my business. I didn't have a lot of free time to be managing it. And, residential is a lot. They talk about toilets, termites, and tenants. And it's really true, because even with a property manager, when you have 6 houses, there's literally something breaking every single week or every other week. And the property manager was just sucking up too much of my time making decisions about what water heater do I replace and what roof do I go and who do I hire. And, he sends you a bill from a plumber for like $750. What am I going to do? I'm not going to negotiate. But it was probably like a 10-minute job. The guy just went out and did this. And so it was very frustrating. But I liked industrial for long-term leases. I wanted to be able to set a lease, set an agreement, get a set amount of rent, and not revisit every single year. I didn't like that. I wanted something with net leasing. So I was, looking at triple net structures so that property taxes go up. Doesn't affect me. I just want to let it pass through to the tenant. And then industrial, again, is probably the lowest complaining user, at least for my asset class, as long as the roof doesn't leak and the toilet's flush, they are not bothering you. I tried to paint one of my buildings, and I was talking to the tenant. I was like, oh, I'm painting, like, what color would you like? And he said, I don't care. And I was like, at all? Like, and he's like, you can paint it if you want. You can paint it pink for all I care. And I was like, huh, okay, well, I'm not spending 15 or 20 grand for zero benefit. It was like literally the tenant did not care. He just wanted, it was functional, it didn't leak, and I just thought the paint was very tired, and there's like some mismatched sections where we replaced with, but he's like, no, I love that you replaced it. I like the functionality, but I do not care if it looks like a patchwork quilt. So it was very eye-opening, and I think that's what I did expect. But that's really what sold me in industrial, and I've doubled and tripled down, and I put all my free capital into that across the portfolio. But I love industrial. I think it's the future. I think e-commerce is only going to grow as penetration grows. So there's a lot of demand for it. We buy infill, so rents only go up, traffic goes up, population increases. So I'm not buying industrial in Michigan or Chicago. Well, Chicago's a little different, but I'm not buying in rural Pennsylvania or Ohio. I like the Sun Belt. I like Texas. But yeah, that's my very long-winded, my industrial thesis is that infill locations, the rents only go up, supply is decreasing, and they don't build a whole lot of my competing product. They're building 34-foot Class A, ESRF with 32 dock high. That's not competing with me, and so there's really been a lack of new product to compete with my rents. So my rents don't go down.
I love that. So we're getting a lot of questions now. We have a question out here. Are you licensed in Tennessee? And if not, what are some of the questions that we need to ask as brokers and agents, a real estate attorney that we could partner with?
Well, see, I'm sorry. I'm gonna hit these chats. No California. Infill locations, it's great. It's a little bit of a fuzzy definition, but I would define it as, in our cities where we're going, we want to be bounded inside of looped highways. So, I'm sure most cities always have ringed highways that go around the perimeter of a city, and that's typically what we call infill. Infill could also be any dense area that's bordered by natural boundaries, where there's just not a lot of vacant land left that could be feasibly converted to compete with your product. So again, for example, if I go north of Plano or north of McKinney and I want to build a warehouse, I'm in farmland up there. There's a lot of vacant land next door to me. So when my rents are $4 a foot and I want to raise them to $5 a foot or $6 a foot, a developer says, Ron, that's crazy. If I can get $6 a foot, I'm going to build your exact building next door to you, just down the road, 5 minutes, 10 minutes down the road. That's not infill because there's a decreasing pressure on my rents because somebody can come and build and undercut my rents or come flat. And so that's what you want. Infill is just, it can have vacant land, but those uses will not be converted to compete with your product. So, again, if you're buying something residential and there's no other vacant land that would be converted to residential use, like it's all retail vacancy, then that's infill for residential. Same for like gas stations or self-storage. If you have self-storage inside a city, but even if there's vacant land, but nobody would build low coverage, low value self-storage on it, you can probably raise your rents pretty high. So that's.
I love that. Great stuff. Let's see. Any other questions out there from anybody? If you'd like to, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask as well.
Carolyn, go for it.
I just want to say thank you. This is really an awesome thing. And would you, Ron, represent businesses that want to? I do business brokering. That's what my focus is. That are specifically, I would think, in the industrial space. Would you be comfortable doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a real estate component, right? I mean, they have a lease or sale leaseback. Yeah, we do a fair number of those. We may pull in an M&A attorney, just really depending on the complexity. But when real estate is driving the value or is a big part of it, yes, we do those transactions.
You collaborate. I'm in the Charlotte area. Do you collaborate with other states?
Yeah, I would say, for
Perfect.
commercial work, we go nationwide. The only exception is probably California, because they do things differently. So.
I'll be in Florida and North Carolina, but that's really good to know because I'm working on my CBI and they just really emphasize how important it is to have a good attorney. And I'm just so blessed. You guys have, thank you, Pamela and David. Thank you.
Yeah, Vu, do you have a question?
Hi, Ron. Yes, I was just wondering what other questions should we be asking when we're vetting someone we're going to work with as an attorney with our deals? What are some common things that people may be missing to ask their attorneys?
Yeah, well, I would say I have a YouTube video on that, how to hire an attorney, where I go through the list of questions. But really, to summarize the video, I think you've got to interview a couple different ones. It's unfortunate, but like, real estate attorneys are very busy right now. We're all kind of slammed, so you may have to do a couple phone calls before you can actually talk to somebody. But I would recommend at least talking to like 2 or 3 different attorneys, because you will see how they have different personalities, different levels of responsiveness, different levels of staffing. Even like, I have an admin that can respond to you right away to schedule a call. You don't have to wait for me at 5:50 to get to my emails and be like, hey, hey, Vu, yeah, we'll set up a call. But ask the same questions and try to track them. Give every attorney the fair level playing field and see how they answer those same questions, because it's very much an expectation versus personality fit and the goals of your client, and seeing how quickly can this attorney, do they understand the goals of your client? Because if you come in and you're buying, a $3 million little piece of dirt with a metal box on it, those goals are different than an investor who is deploying $42 million across 4 states. They have a $10 million minimum transaction, and they're interviewing me to do that type of work, right? Those are very different goals. Experience level, fee expectations, responsiveness, and attention to detail expectations. All of those are different. And again, I'm not saying it's bad or worse, but that latter client will get charged more. Absolutely, and they want to get charged more for a higher level of work product. You may not be as happy with $20,000 of legal fees on that $3 million deal, but a $10 million deal absolutely should have $20,000 of legal. So no wrong answer. It's just about finding the right fit for you, and getting an idea of scope of work and fee expectation, because yeah, those are the 2 questions that I think people ask the most. Is my advice is get a clear understanding of scope of work, and if you don't know what you want, ask the attorney, well, what would you recommend we do? Do you recommend a PCA, a property condition analysis? Do you recommend a phase 2 environmental study? All of these types of things. They may not have opinions. Do you recommend estoppels? Do you recommend SNDAs? Like, all of these questions, sorry, more acronyms, but subordination, non-disturbance agreement for your lender, and the new landlord. But these are all options. And if you don't know what you want, you've got to ask somebody. And unfortunately, it's like, either ask the broker or ask your lawyer. But the broker and the lawyer are a team. They really work to complement each other. So if you're unsure about something, then ask your lawyer. And then on the flip side too, I lean on brokers too. I do some deals where the broker is like 30 years of experience. He's only done this asset class. I'll defer to them. I'll be like, hey, what do you think I should draft? Hey, what do you want me to do in this situation for the client? And he'll say, Ron, draft this and then draft that, and then I'll take a look at it. And I'm like, no problem. There's a give and take, and you just have to understand what you don't know, and hopefully your counterpart will have that experience. And then the client is a third rail too, right? Don't get me wrong. Some of these clients are very sophisticated as well. So there's really 3 people on the team that you can bounce ideas off of, and you just got to work together to serve the client.
I love that you said that, because been a part of situations where you're not working harmoniously, and it's not good for the client at the end of the day, right? It's important to have, as a broker or an agent, it's really important to have an attorney or a lawyer on your side that's willing to collaborate and work harmoniously with you through that transaction. Otherwise, it's probably not going to end good for the client. And that's always our main goal, right? We have
Yep.
one more message and 3 more minutes. Actually, it's not a message. It's a thanks, Ron. Not a question, I should say. So I think that's really a great place to end. If you have any final advice or words for any agents, either looking to get into industrial real estate or into commercial real estate in general, we can end on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice for brokers is it's a great area to focus on because of the resiliency of the asset class. So everybody is buying industrial, and you saw during COVID that multifamily evictions, had a moratorium. You've got rent control, and that's being passed in more states. And it's a real problem if you're underwriting a 7% rent increase and you're only allowed to increase it 4%. What do you do? It really blows up your NOI. And so I really think that if you can become an expert in your local market in a one or two types of industrial that is appealing for investors, you will always have a steady supply of clients because I say the adage too is like no commercial investor owns just one property. Like nobody has just one industrial property. It's not a thing. But on residential, it's kind of one and done, and other asset classes are kind of smaller. But if you can get into this world, it's finding clients that are repeats. The commissions are bigger. Everything is just works smoother because I think the market is still very strong for transaction volume. And so, you've got to pick an asset class in an area that has the volume to support your growth plans. And I think industrial is definitely it. It's not going to shrink by any means. So,
thank you for that. I'm sorry, we do have one question. Nazi?
Yes. I want to get your opinion about the California.
okay, I will say this is not legal advice, but happy to try.
Which I wanted to see what do you see the difference of the California? I know most of the people are staying away from California, and I want to get your opinion. And lots of people are investors, they move their asset out of state of California, but I like to hear your point of view.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for industrial, California is a great market. It is big. There's lots of people. There is lots of demand for goods and services. You've got the Port of Long Beach. You've got tons of manufacturing capacity out there. The hard part for industrial in California is just kind of navigating where do laws that they pass, with good intentions, where do those hit you? Because there's a little bit of overlap, say like employees. So you've got to understand if you're starting to hire property managers or you're hiring different people in California, how to comply with the rules that are generally aimed at big businesses, or, they're aimed at multifamily landlords. You get kind of sucked up in the law because it wasn't really written well. It says, landlords with more than 100 million of assets or more than 5 properties now have to pay this extra tax for trees, or like swimming pool tax, something like that. It's like that stupid. It says if you own 5 or more commercial rental properties, you have to pay a swimming pool tax because of the use of water. And you're saying, wait a minute, why do I have to pay? I don't even have any swimming pools. And that's not what it's meant for. It's just in general, you guys average own it. And so you get sucked up in little things like that. But industrial in California has kind of no bearing anymore on pricing because it's so high, right? Inland Empire, OC, Long Beach, those prices, Riverside, are insane. It kind of, makes my mind kind of melt, where people are paying $2 million an acre for iOS because their rents are $40,000 a month. It's really hard for me to understand the metrics because the valuations are just so squeezed. They're land constrained. Their pricing for retail customers is so high. So it makes it difficult, but that doesn't mean it's a bad investment, right? If I just 10x the numbers or divide by 10, you could buy something in Dallas. You could buy something in Houston if you divide by 10. But you would tell me, Ron, there's nothing wrong with California. Why wouldn't you buy that? It's just the numbers are times 10. So I think maybe that's my takeaway from California. People have made a ton of money in California, and you know, all the national shops you buy in California because the economy is there, the trucks are there, all this shipping is there, manufacturing. So there's nothing wrong with it, but it is a higher price point. It is a higher price of entry. I do think your mistakes are a little bit magnified, but the profits are also there too. So if it's your local market and you know it, there's nothing wrong with investing in California. You just have to understand again that like you buy this metal box and in Texas, for me to get it up to code, it might cost me $30,000, $50,000 to do some certain updates. When you buy that same building in LA County and it's deficient and you want to put a new tenant and you want to apply for a certificate of occupancy, you may need to spend $500,000 to get that building up to code. You're putting solar panels on, you're adding additional parking spots, you're using, biodegradable building materials, and your mind is gonna kind of take a shock of, why do I have to spend this much? I only paid for $5 million for this building and the dirt. I got to spend another $500,000 to get it up to code, and that's the problem. Again, that's probably a better example. Building code and different city ordinances and county ordinances, mandatory solar, mandatory energy recovery systems. You have to do a water audit. You've got to pay all these consultants, all these engineers to sign off on your building to get your C of O. When you get it, that tenant is going to be paying you $115,000 a month, but there's a big gap. There's a big gap.
Might as well just be a philanthropist.
Yeah, and so I think the people that don't do well are if you're not deep pockets, that if that concerns you, again, I can buy a building and I can drop 50K and I can drop 100K. It's not a problem. I fully expect it to get it into tenantable conditions. Fine, no problem in Texas. I don't want to spend $5 million and an additional $500,000 for me personally. I know there's people with more money, but that's the kind of mindset. You can't just say like, okay, I'm putting $2 million in as equity, I'm done. Let me get a tenant. I'll spend some commissions, some leasing commissions, maybe a little bit of TI. No, you are caught up in this California overlay of regulation, which again, I don't know if you want to say it's bad or good. Solar requirements seem good. Seems like it saves the tenants energy costs. Fine, whatever. But you have to spend it. You have to get consultants to finance the solar. You have to use biodegradable building materials. You have to do a lot more compliance work that is not found in, I would say, any other state or locality jurisdiction, with the exception of maybe Washington State. Washington State is also pretty crazy, and Oregon to some degree. But
New Mexico.
So New Mexico is interesting. I've got lots of opinions. If you want to ask, I like New Mexico. I think the population. What's that?
New Mexico.
Yeah. I think New Mexico, the state, their population has been kind of flat. It doesn't really grow. They don't really have kind of this dynamic job growth and population boom. So the people that it looks like there are good deals in New Mexico based on cap rate and based on cost, replacement cost, and it can be appealing, I think, from an investor purchase point of view. But I think the issue with New Mexico is it's hard to exit. There are a lot of there's more deals for sale than for purchase, and you get suckered in of like, oh, I'm gonna buy this at an 8 cap because it's attractive as a cap rate for a comp. But then you got to think like, why is it like this? It's been sitting on the market, and then when you go to sell, you have the exact same problem. And I've had clients again for the last 5 or 10 years. I've seen people buy New Mexico, and then it's hard to sell. it's a small state. I think people don't really understand that. You got to look at the population. It's like a few million. You just don't have that local investor network that's wealthy enough or buys. Whereas you could buy and sell within Dallas or say like even San Antonio, same total population as the state of New Mexico. But if you're trying to sell a property in San Antonio, you have local investors from Houston, from Austin, from Dallas that are willing to buy assets in San Antonio. They will not buy that same asset in New Mexico, even if the numbers are the same or better. And so this is just my theory, completely not based on any facts. But New Mexico is tough because I see a lot of deals sitting and they look attractive, but it's hard to exit. It's yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Well, Ron, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you for making everything, understandable and consumable for everybody on this Zoom. And we just really appreciate you. And we'll make sure that everybody has your contact information, all 87,000 of us. So we love the fact that you're already doing business in partnership with some eXp commercial agents. That's fantastic. You have been a huge insight, a lot of information for us, and we just really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys. That was fun.
Yeah, awesome. All right, well, you take care. Everybody out there, have a great day, and don't forget to come back and join us in 2 weeks where we'll be going over market trends and stats in your neighborhood.
Awesome.
See you then.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.